She hit targets that shouldn't be possible. No scope adjustments, no wind calculations, just pure instinct guiding bullets to impossible marks. When police arrived at the main shooting range, they expected a routine permit check. What they discovered instead would shake a small-town courthouse and reveal one of America's most classified secrets. The woman who refused to speak, who sat in handcuffs with unshakable calm, wasn't just anyone. She was someone the government would do anything to protect. The morning fog hung thick over Coastal Harbor's remote shooting range when Frank Holden noticed her. 22 years in the Navy had taught him to read people, and this woman didn't fit any category he knew. Mid-30s, completely unremarkable in faded jeans and a baseball cap pulled low. She carried herself like someone trying very hard to be invisible. But invisibility becomes suspicious when you're hitting center mass at distances that would challenge Olympic marksmen. Frank watched through his booth window as she methodically assembled her rifle. No wasted movements, no hesitation. Her breathing technique was textbook perfect, the controlled 4-count inhale, the steady hold, the relaxed exhale as she squeezed the trigger. Most telling was how she adjusted for wind changes without any equipment, sensing atmospheric shifts that even seasoned hunters would miss completely. Other shooters began to notice, whispered conversations about the woman at the far lane hitting impossible shots. Someone mentioned she had no identification badge, no visible permits. In a post-9/11 world, that kind of detail makes people nervous. Within 20 minutes, Frank's phone was ringing with concerns from worried patrons. When the police cruiser pulled up, Frank felt an odd sense of dread. The woman at the far lane didn't seem surprised. If anything, she appeared to be calculating something only she could understand. Two officers approached cautiously, hands positioned near their holsters. Standard procedure for investigating suspicious activity. They asked for identification and weapon permits. Her response chilled everyone within earshot, complete, respectful silence. No panic, no protests, no explanations. Just steady eye contact and an unnerving sense that she was in complete control of the situation despite being outnumbered and outgunned. The search revealed almost nothing. No wallet, no phone, no identification of any kind, just a keycard with no markings and a small notebook filled with what appeared to be coordinates. When they told her she was under arrest, something remarkable happened. She didn't resist the handcuffs. She didn't demand a lawyer or threaten to call anyone. She simply complied with such professional calm that it unsettled the officers more than violent resistance would have. But Frank noticed something as they escorted her to the police car. Her eyes never stopped moving. She scanned the tree line, the road, the mountain range in the distance, as if she was memorizing every detail for reasons no one else could comprehend. This wasn't the behavior of someone in trouble. This was the behavior of someone still working. The Coastal Harbor Sheriff's Office had handled thousands of arrests over the decades. Drunk drivers, domestic disputes, the occasional drug bust. Nothing had prepared them for processing someone who seemed to exist outside their understanding of how people behave when facing serious charges. She submitted to fingerprinting without complaint, but offered no information. Name, address, emergency contact, every question met with polite, professional silence. Detective Marcus Wells tried every interrogation technique he knew. Friendly conversation, implied threats about federal charges, mentions of cooperation benefits. She responded to each approach with the same respectful silence, never breaking eye contact, never showing fear or anger. It was as if she was following a protocol they couldn't understand. The fingerprint search came back empty. No matches in local, state, or federal databases they could access. In a world where everyone leaves digital footprints, finding someone who exists nowhere in the system should have been impossible. Yet here she was, sitting in their holding cell like a living ghost. That night something changed in her behavior, subtle shifts that only someone with military experience might notice. She examined her cell with measured precision, noting camera positions and identifying blind spots. Through her window, she studied the building layout, marking emergency exits and security protocols. This wasn't casual observation. This was professional assessment. When a rookie officer brought her water, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a distinctive scar on her wrist. The kind of mark left by specialized training exercises involving rope descents from helicopters. When questioned about it, she spoke for the first time in hours, claiming it was from a rock climbing accident. The lie was so smoothly delivered that it almost seemed plausible. The public defender arrived late the next afternoon, harried and overworked. After 20 minutes of getting nowhere, his frustration was obvious. The weapon she'd been carrying wasn't registered anywhere in any database they could access. Prosecutors were discussing terrorist threat charges, yet she maintained that same unshakable calm, as if she knew something everyone else didn't. As they prepared her for arraignment the next morning, Detective Wells made a troubling observation. Despite facing serious federal charges, despite the orange jumpsuit and restraints, she carried herself with the patience of someone waiting for a predetermined outcome. Not the defiance of a career criminal or the fear of someone genuinely in trouble, but the steady confidence of someone following a script. The Coastal Harbor Courthouse had witnessed thousands of arraignments since its construction in 1887. Local reporters, curious residents, and unusually, several men in dark suits positioned strategically throughout the packed gallery. Judge Eleanor Harmon reviewed the unusual case with obvious irritation, dealing with jurisdictional disputes between Homeland Security and FBI agents who'd appeared seemingly from nowhere. The charges were read: possession of unregistered firearms, refusal to identify to law enforcement, potential terrorist activity. Standard procedure for cases involving unidentified individuals with specialized weapons. The defendant remained motionless, eyes focused forward, posture perfect despite restraints. But then something happened that would be talked about in legal circles for years to come. The heavy oak doors at the courthouse's rear swung open with dramatic finality. Every head turned as a Navy admiral in full dress uniform entered, medals gleaming under fluorescent lights. Two officers flanked him, equally formal in their bearing. The gallery fell completely silent as he walked directly down the center aisle without announcement or permission. Military veterans throughout the room instinctively stood at attention. Even Judge Harmon, a former JAG officer herself, straightened her posture as the Admiral approached the bench. He handed a sealed document to the bailiff, who delivered it with obvious reverence to the judge. As Judge Harmon broke the seal and read, her expression shifted from annoyance to surprise to grave understanding. The document's contents were clearly beyond anything she'd encountered in decades on the bench. After a long, tense moment, she looked up with newfound respect and made an announcement that stunned everyone present. In light of this documentation from the Department of Defense, all charges against the defendant are dismissed effective immediately. This case is classified as a matter of national security. The gavel's bang was final and absolute. Court is adjourned. The room erupted in confused murmurs as the Admiral approached the defendant. The bailiff quickly removed her handcuffs. For the first time since her arrest, the woman spoke clearly, her voice carrying unmistakable authority despite its softness. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience." The Admiral's response silenced every person in the courtroom. "On the contrary, Commander, the Navy apologizes to you." At the word commander, every military person present snapped to perfect attention in obvious respect. Detective Wells watched in amazement as the woman's entire demeanor transformed before his eyes. No longer attempting invisibility, she stood tall with deliberate military bearing that suddenly commanded the room as powerfully as the Admiral himself. Judge Harmon offered a respectful nod to both officers. The Admiral explained with professional discretion, "Commander Hayes has been operating under classified orders. The situation required complete discretion." Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for information while the woman, now in civilian clothes provided by Navy personnel, stood beside the Admiral near a black government SUV. Sheriff Daniels approached with confusion and respect battling across his face. Admiral, my department deserves some explanation. We've been treating this as a potential terrorist threat. The Admiral's response was carefully measured. Commander Hayes is one of our most decorated special operators. I can assure you she poses no threat to your community. Quite the opposite. An elderly veteran in a VFW cap approached cautiously. Ma'am, I was a corpsman with the Marines in Desert Storm. I knew there was something familiar about how you carried yourself. He extended his hand with genuine respect. Thank you for your service, whatever it is you do. But the real revelation came when the Admiral checked his watch and mentioned their next destination. Commander Hayes, Operation Silent Harbor requires debriefing and Washington is waiting for your report. Sheriff Daniels' eyes widened with recognition. Silent Harbor, the counterterrorism operation that had prevented a catastrophic port attack the previous year, saving thousands of lives. The Admiral remained professionally vague about details, but his next words hinted at the magnitude of what they'd witnessed. Commander Hayes has given 12 years of exemplary service to this country. Much of it will never be known to the public. As they moved toward their vehicle, something remarkable happened. The law enforcement officers present, including those who had arrested and detained her, formed an impromptu honor corridor. Military personnel among them saluted as she passed. Detective Wells finally understood what had seemed so odd about her from the beginning. She hadn't been trying to hide guilt. She'd been trained to hide excellence. That evening, Commander Hayes returned to the shooting range to retrieve her equipment. Without needing to maintain her cover, she moved with the fluid efficiency of someone at the absolute peak of physical and mental training. Frank, the range officer, had suspected something from the beginning. 20 years in Navy submarines had given him an eye for people who operated in specialized roles. Her rifle wasn't standard issue for anyone he knew. When she assembled it and took aim at a target barely visible in fading light, an impossible shot by any standard, the result was a perfect bullseye. No scope, no hesitation, just pure professional skill developed through years of training most people couldn't imagine. Some of us are always around, she told Frank as she prepared to leave. You just don't see us. Those words would prove more prophetic than anyone realized. 2 weeks later, Detective Wells received a call that would change his life forever. Admiral Wilson was extending an invitation to Commander Hayes' Commendation ceremony at Naval Station Norfolk. The ceremony was classified, but they could arrange clearance for the detective who'd been involved in the situation. The next morning, Wells drove through multiple security checkpoints to reach a small auditorium filled with fewer than 50 people. High-ranking officers and personnel in civilian clothing who carried themselves with unmistakable military bearing. No press, no photographers, no public recognition for what he was about to witness. Admiral Wilson approached the podium with solemn dignity. Today we recognize Commander Alexandra Hayes for extraordinary service during Operation Silent Harbor. For security reasons, I can only say that Commander Hayes spent 11 months undercover, identifying and neutralizing a critical threat to our national security. Wells watched as Commander Hayes stepped forward in her formal Navy uniform, adorned with ribbons and commendations that spoke of service most people would never comprehend. She bore little resemblance to the unremarkable woman he'd arrested at the shooting range. The Admiral continued with carefully chosen words. Commander Hayes established herself as one of our foremost experts in counterterrorism and unconventional warfare. She became one of the first female operators to qualify for Naval Special Warfare Development Group, though this fact remains classified. The magnitude of what Wells was hearing began to sink in. He'd handcuffed and processed someone operating at the highest levels of national security, someone whose very existence was classified beyond normal government protocols. During Operation Silent Harbor, Commander Hayes eliminated 16 confirmed threats while maintaining deep cover. Her actions directly prevented a coordinated attack on 3 eastern seaboard ports that would have resulted in catastrophic loss of life. The Admiral looked directly at Commander Hayes with obvious respect. When your position was potentially compromised, you maintained operational security despite personal risk, even when doing so resulted in your detention by local authorities. Wells felt embarrassment, but noticed Commander Hayes nodding respectfully toward him with no anger or resentment in her expression. After the ceremony, she approached him with genuine appreciation for his presence. "Detective, congratulations on your commendation," Wells said. "Thank you for coming," she replied, extending her hand. "I want to apologize again for what happened." Her response revealed the true professionalism of her character. "No need. You were doing exactly what you should have done given the information you had. Your thoroughness was actually impressive." When Wells asked why it had been necessary to be detained rather than identifying herself privately, her answer revealed the complexity of deep cover operations. "The operation wasn't complete. My cover identity needed to remain intact even under scrutiny. The individuals we were tracking had contacts throughout local government and law enforcement along the coast. If word got out that I'd received special treatment, 11 months of work would have been compromised." She'd allowed herself to be arrested, processed, and charged rather than risk compromising a mission that had already saved thousands of lives. Sometimes the best way to maintain cover is to commit fully to it, even when it's inconvenient, she said with the ghost of a smile. "I knew the Admiral would intervene before things went too far." 6 months later, Wells stood on the deck of a naval vessel, watching the Maine coast disappear into the distance. After 13 years with the Coastal Harbor Police Department, he'd accepted a position with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. His first assignment, liaison between local law enforcement and naval special operations along the eastern seaboard. His phone buzzed with a text from an unlisted number. "Some of us are always around. Welcome aboard." Wells recognized Commander Hayes' words from the shooting range, understanding that he'd probably never see her again. People like her operate in shadows, their successes never celebrated publicly, their sacrifices rarely acknowledged. But now he'd be part of the system supporting them, ensuring that the next time someone like Commander Hayes needed to maintain cover, protocols would exist to protect both the operation and local authorities doing their jobs. His experience became a training scenario for police departments along the coast, teaching officers to recognize signs of specialized operators in civilian encounters. Then one stormy evening, a knock came at his NCIS office door. Standing there in civilian clothes with that deliberately unremarkable appearance was Commander Hayes. "Plans change," she said, taking a seat. "I understand you've implemented new protocols for identifying operators in the field." She slid a folder across his desk marked with an operation name that made his pulse quicken. "Silent Harbor 2. We need someone with your perspective for an upcoming operation. Someone who understands both sides, law enforcement and military. Someone who can navigate the gray areas when they overlap." Wells studied the classified documents, beginning to understand the scope of what she was proposing. A joint task force targeting domestic threats with international connections, operating in shadows between military jurisdiction and civilian law enforcement. "Why me?" he asked finally. Commander Hayes studied him with those same calculating eyes he remembered from their first encounter. "Because when you arrested me, you knew something wasn't right, but you followed procedure anyway. You put duty above instinct. That's exactly what we need." When Wells asked when they'd start, her response revealed they were already deeper in than he'd realized. "We already have. Meet me tomorrow at 600. Same shooting range where we first met. And Wells, this time, leave the handcuffs at home." Meanwhile, Frank had been contacted about preparing his range for exclusive use. The check Commander Hayes provided covered 6 months of operating costs, but as he told her, he would have agreed anyway. Over the next 72 hours, his simple shooting range transformed into a tactical operations center with maps covering walls, communications equipment filling his office, and firing lanes converted to staging areas. The operation that unfolded revealed the true scope of threats most civilians never know exist. Intelligence had identified a potential security threat within 50 miles, planning something significant within 48 hours. 3 possible locations, all in civilian areas where traditional military raids weren't possible. Wells coordinated with local authorities, establishing cover stories and contingency plans without revealing the operation's true nature. The breakthrough came through electronic intelligence, coded transmissions from an abandoned waterfront warehouse owned by a shell company. The raid happened just before dawn. Local tactical teams moved in with federal agents while Commander Hayes and her team maintained overwatch positions. 8 arrests, significant weapon seizures, and intelligence materials that would keep analysts busy for months. The official story mentioned only a successful joint operation based on anonymous intelligence. By noon, most of Commander Hayes' team had disappeared, leaving no trace of their presence. Frank methodically returned his range to normal configuration, understanding that certain details would need to be forgotten. Equipment, personnel, the exact nature of operations, some secrets are kept not from enemies, but from citizens whose peace of mind depends on not knowing how close danger actually comes. Commander Hayes left Frank with a business card containing only a phone number. If you notice anyone else with unusual talents, this reaches people who might be interested. Frank understood recruitment never stops. The right people are hard to find and even harder to recognize. 6 months later, Frank noticed a young woman at his range with technique that spoke of professional training. When she adjusted for crosswind without instruments, he remembered Commander Hayes doing the same thing. After watching her systematic approach to different distances, he made the call. The authentication phrase Wells had taught him opened doors: blue water, still horizon. Within days, the woman returned with a middle-aged man carrying himself with obvious authority. She'd been an assessment candidate, part of her evaluation involving shooting without drawing attention. She's skilled, Frank acknowledged, but there are tells if you know what to look for. The feedback was accepted professionally, revealing that talent spots talent better than formal systems sometimes can. The man handed Frank an envelope containing a new business card with Naval Special Warfare insignia and different contact information. We're always looking for training facilities and observers. Commander Hayes spoke highly of your situational awareness. That carries weight in our organization. After 15 years running a simple shooting range, Frank found himself part of an invisible network identifying and nurturing the nation's most specialized defenders. The next morning brought a package high-end spotting scope with thermal capabilities and encrypted communication module. The note contained only 3 words in familiar handwriting: "Keep watching, Frank." He understood perfectly. He wasn't just running a shooting range anymore. He was maintaining a waypoint in a hidden network, a place where operators could practice away from curious eyes. Commander Hayes might have moved on to new operations, new identities, new missions, but her legacy continued in this small corner of Maine. Some people serve in uniform for all to see. Others serve in shadows, their greatest victories the ones the public never hears about. And some, like Frank, simply keep watch, ensuring those shadows remain safe places for necessary work. The truth about America's most classified defenders isn't found in official records or public ceremonies. It's hidden in plain sight, in unremarkable people hitting impossible targets, in small-town arrests that disappear from official records, in shooting ranges that serve purposes far beyond what most visitors could imagine. Commander Hayes and others like her move through our world constantly, preventing attacks we never hear about, neutralizing threats we never see, maintaining the invisible barrier between safety and chaos. They ask for no recognition, expect no gratitude, and leave no trace of their presence. But they're always around. You just don't see them unless you know exactly how to look. And perhaps that's exactly how it should be, the most dangerous people in the world protecting us from the shadows, ensuring our security by remaining forever unseen. The next time you see someone who seems a little too calm, a little too aware, hitting targets that shouldn't be possible, remember Commander Hayes. Remember that some of our greatest protectors are designed to be invisible, and our safety often depends on never knowing how close we came to losing it. Because in the world of classified operations, the greatest success is when nothing appears to happen at all.